Joining me now, Molly Ball, senior political correspondent with the Wall Street Journal, and Jacqueline Alemany, a congressional investigations reporter with the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Good to see both of you. So, Molly, Donald Trump praising Eastman as being right at this event with key players in the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. What does that say to you about Trump's willingness to move beyond the 2020 election or lack thereof?
Yeah, I think it's just a reminder that, as you say, he has never acknowledged the truth of what happened on January 6th, and he's been engaged in an attempt to rewrite and whitewash the events of those days ever since. And he believes that he's been successful. If anything, he believes that his victory in the 2024 election was a sort of vindication of sorts for this attempt to rewrite history that he's been engaged in for the past 4 years. He continues to be unashamed of what happened. He's never paid a price for it, of course, was not successfully convicted when he was impeached for the second time, and never, will face any legal consequences, as at least it looks like. So I think it's a reminder that this is just something that, and I think going forward, right, we think that Trump may look to pardon the January 6th rioters potentially on his first day in office. So once he reassumes that power in the White House, he is going to continue to try to rewrite this history.
And Jackie, Trump also met with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni last night ahead of her scheduled meeting with President Biden in just a few days. A few reporters were told about the Eastman event, but none seem to have known about the Prime Minister being there as well. Are you surprised by this? Why not put it out there?
Yeah, Alex, not at all surprised in terms of the types. Giorgia Meloni fits into the types of world leaders that Donald Trump hopes to foster even closer relationships with once he does assume the White House. As for why that information wasn't necessarily publicized, I'm not exactly sure as to that reason, but Meloni and Trump have been pretty public about their relationship and their mutual appreciation for each other in the past. And she obviously is one of the most conservative prime ministers in Europe right now. And those in the Trump camp believe that she's going to become essentially the go-to ally for the president-elect in Europe, especially as he's sort of taken an adversarial and hostile approach to some of our European neighbors and neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. Although the role that Meloni is going to be playing might not necessarily be a welcome one for her in terms of being that person that's going to mediate the relationships between Trump and others as he applies pressure on some of her neighboring countries, as well as trying to dramatically alter the role that the U.S. plays when it comes to NATO and NATO countries in terms of the support for Ukraine in its war with Russia. But again, Meloni is the latest on the list of fairly conservative leaders who have paid visits to Mar-a-Lago, including former Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary, who, as we know, has been a champion of a liberal democracy, and Javier Milei, Argentina's firebrand president as well. Justin Trudeau also visited Trump recently on the tails of him threatening to start a tariff war with Canada.
Yeah. A very interesting point, that the Meloni perspective of having to basically help negotiate Trump's will throughout Europe, potentially. Molly, this whole event comes ahead of tomorrow's certification of the 2024 election win, 4 years after the attack at the Capitol. Do you have a sense of the mood, what it's going to be like in D.C. tomorrow?
Well, it may be half empty just because we're anticipating a big snowstorm overnight. My kids' school here in the D.C. suburbs has already been canceled, so it could be a very slushy Capitol. But, as Vaughn was saying earlier, we don't expect there to be any objections. We expect this to be a quite smooth process. I think, as much as Republicans have sought to forget and to bury the events of January 6th, 2021, I think there will be plenty of Democrats who want to commemorate the events of that day and continue to remember it. So we may see some remembrances from that side of the aisle. But I think, if anything, this is the first presidential inauguration since that one. And that was the first time in American history that we had not had a peaceful transfer of power completely. And so I think it is a healthy sign that this one will, as far as we know, it will go forward uninterrupted. It will be, a normal passing of the torch from the president of one party to the next. The inauguration, of course, is still a few weeks off. But I think it is a reminder of our democratic processes continuing to function.
Yeah, 100%. Jackie, House Speaker Mike Johnson told Republicans this weekend that Donald Trump wants to pass one huge reconciliation package instead of a separate border and energy bill, followed by a tax bill that's been proposed by new Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Let's take a listen to him explaining why one bill a bit earlier today.
No one's going to love every element of a large package like that. But there'll be enough elements in there to pull everyone along. They'll be able to justify not getting all of their preferences on some of their big issues because there'll be so many other very important pieces to that one piece of legislation. So I think keeping it together is how we'll actually get it done, and there's some real value to that.
So there he is explaining, but what does it tell you that Donald Trump is already expecting to be at odds with some of the leadership in Congress?
Well, Alex, I think this decision is yes, at odds with Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who indicated earlier this month that he wanted a two-bill strategy as opposed to doing things in one hefty package. But I do think most Republicans in Congress are in agreement with President-elect Trump and Mike Johnson on this because of fears about attempting the two-budget bill process that would require additional political capital, whereas with this single bill, it's going to allow them through the reconciliation process, which is this process that allows lawmakers to bypass a 60-vote threshold and makes the lift a little bit easier in terms of unifying a pretty fractious party, as opposed to having to corral people around two separate bills. But the flip side of this is that some of Donald Trump's priorities are going to have to be kicked down the road a little later than people would like. There were people in the future Trump administration, people like Stephen Miller, who were advocating for the two-pronged approach so that they could get things like border security, energy, and done right off the bat and fulfill some campaign promises. But again, there were lawmakers, especially those who were involved with the tax policy, which probably would have been the later end of these two bills, if that were the approach that we're taking, who were fairly concerned about splitting this into two parts because, it would just be really challenging to rally people around something who have already raised concerns about extending Trump's tax cuts and adding to the deficit after having already asked them to maybe throw their support behind another bill that they might not unanimously support.
Molly, can I ask you what you're hearing about Donald Trump holding a January 19th rally the day before the inauguration? First of all, how unusual is that?
It's not tremendously common. It's supposed to be at, the arena in D.C., so an indoor event. But, he wants to bring people here for the inauguration. He certainly wants a large crowd. And so, if anything, this is a way of, giving his supporters another reason to come to D.C., come to see the inauguration. But I don't really read much more into it than that.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. Glad to have you weighing in on the issues, Molly and Jackie. Appreciate you.